This year marks the 40th anniversary of the first hunger strike in the 1980s in Ireland. The fast, which began in Lancash in October 1980, was to lead to a year which was to be dominated by hunger strikes. March 1976, following the ending of internment without trial the previous December and the collapse of the IRA British 1975 truce, political status, which was won in 1972 after a hunger strike in Crumlin Road Jail, was ended. As criminalization, austerization, and normalization became the main policy of the British government in the North, vigorously pursued by the new British Secretary of State, Roy Mason, conditions inside the prison deteriorated dramatically. In mid-September 1976, Karen Nugent, the first Republican prisoner to be convicted since the abolition of political status the previous March, refused to wear prison clothes and was left in his cell with nothing to wear except a blanket. He was later joined by hundreds of others convicted by the non-jury Diplock courts, who were determined to resist criminalization. After 2 years, the prisoners were forced to embark on a no-wash protest. In the winter of 1979, a newly formed H-Block Armagh Committee was formed to campaign on behalf of the prisoners. After almost a year of high-profile protests throughout Ireland and in America, and with no response from Margaret Thatcher's government, the prisoners, left with no other means to highlight their plight, decided after much deliberation to embark on a hunger strike for political status. In late October 1980, 7 prisoners in the H-Blocks, led by Brendan Hughes, who was succeeded as OC, Officer Commanding, by Bobby Sands, began a hunger strike for political status. Hughes was joined on the fast by 5 other IRA volunteers: Tom McFeely, Sean McKenna, Leo Green, Tommy McKierney, and Raymond McCartney, and an INLA volunteer, John Nixon. In early December, as the hunger strike entered its 6th week, they were joined on the fast by 3 women in Armagh Jail who had, along with their comrades, been on the no-wash protest since the previous February. They were Mairead Farrell, OC of the prisoners, Mairead Nugent, and Mary Doyle. However, despite huge protests throughout Ireland during November and early December, the British government refused to grant the prisoners' demands. In mid-December, as Sean McKenna neared death, and as the prisoners prepared to escalate the hunger strike, the British government announced that they were prepared to concede to the prisoners' demands on a phased-in basis once the fast had ended. Trusting that Humphrey Atkins, the then Secretary of State for Britain, would not renege on this promise, Sands, having consulted his staff, the prisoners, and those on the fast, reluctantly decided to end the hunger strike on Thursday, December 18th. After weeks of delays by the British in implementing the promised changes and confusion among the prisoners and their supporters, it became apparent in January 1981 that political status was not to be granted. The prisoners, faced with no alternative, would be forced to embark on a new fast that would have widespread repercussions in Ireland and abroad.